Good morning.
Good morning. We'll just give everyone a minute while you connect your videos, and I believe everyone's on mute, so just if this is going to be an interactive session, so feel free to take yourself off mute at any time and ask questions and engage. Good morning, everyone. Just make sure I'm getting everyone in from the waiting room. Okay. Good morning, Leanne. All right. Well, we will just jump straight into it. We've got quite a few faces here this morning already, and we'll just continue allowing people into the room as they log on. So welcome everyone, and thanks again for taking the time to join us today for media training with our media and PR expert, Jackie Asante, Vice President at FleishmanHillard HighRoad. Jackie, we're thrilled to have you here today.
Thanks.
Some of you may already be familiar with Jackie from the breakout session she presented at our Insight conference last month on how to craft your post-pandemic messaging. So you will have had a sneak preview of the media training today, but of course today Jackie will be going into much more depth and make it a lot more interactive for everyone. So we're looking forward to some one-on-one coaching from Jackie this morning. A little bit about Jackie. She's celebrating her 10th anniversary with FleishmanHillard HighRoad this year. And with 30 plus years in the business, she's led initiatives for long-term clients in a range of industries, including retail and tourism sectors. She's also a big fan of the BC wine industry. And I hope everyone had a chance to review the agenda that was circulated yesterday afternoon. I've attached it again here in the comments section for your reference. And Jackie will go through that this morning as well before getting started. And a reminder that the webinar will be recorded and a link will be emailed to everyone early next week, if not tomorrow. So now I'd like to turn things over to our media expert and coach, Jackie Asante. Thanks again, Jackie, for being here.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Laura. This is gonna be so much fun. I am so happy to be here. I want to say hello to everyone. I'm trying to play with my screen to get as many people in as possible. So there's a couple of things I would say. I'm actually going to want to do a lot of interaction. So if folks don't mind, if they could come onto the screen, if you could actually be able to show me your beautiful faces, that would be great. Yay! Hi, Leanne. Thanks. And I know that I can only see so many at a time. I've tried to maximize how many faces I can fit in. So I will maybe be going back and forth from screen to screen to make sure that I can see folks. And I've delivered a lot of sessions over the past year. The online format is a great format because it makes it open to everyone. But on the other hand, we need to also try and be, as I like to try and be, as interactive as possible. So we need to mute the mics most of the time because of the feedback issue. But again, I'd love to see your faces as everybody is coming in and joining us. If you turn on your video, doesn't matter what you look like. If you rolled out of bed to see this, throw on a ball cap and it's all good. So yes, going to be active as opposed to passive to the extent that we can manage it, but still stay within time. So that's a big deal. And thanks to Laura and to Cynthia, who are going to be my fearless supporters through this process as we roll through the next couple of hours. So timing from 9 to noon, and I've built in some breaks as you saw from the agenda. Let's take a look. Synth, if you advance to the next slide, we'll see the agenda. I've been kind of given it a rough breakdown here over the 3-hour sessions. I've got fingers crossed. If you notice me starting to talk faster and faster and faster, that's me trying to squeeze everything in and make sure that everybody gets lots of value out of this. So hour one, some introductions. I'm going to call on some of you to represent from your regions. We're going to do some scene setting, talking about the fact that the pandemic is going to end at some point. and what people are going to expect from us. That's a look at the research. And then we're going to really focus on like messaging, spokesperson, best practices, interview prep, some ways that you can take control in an interview situation. I'm going to focus on one in particular, know when to hold them, know when to, okay, it's the Kenny Rogers song and I'm going to mess it up. But anyway, we're going to get there. And then I'm absolutely going to ask people to create some of your own messaging, jot it down, and then we're going to do some interviews. Okay, I have some questions prepared. I would love people to step up. Otherwise, you know, Laura and I are going to have to point the fingers at people and say, we want you to do, we want you to do. Well, that would be a drag. So we know that we're going to have people that are going to step up and say, I'm bold, I'm beautiful, I'm going to do this, and that'll be great. I'm going to try and leave enough room for 3 little interviews at the end. Then we'll do some group feedback and some one-on-one coaching. So what went well and where you might have some strengths and weaknesses. So we'll work on that. So free coaching, just putting it out there. And then at the end, some body language conversations about what the audience is seeing from you and what you want to make sure that you do or not do in some cases. And then hopefully a few minutes left at the end for questions. Okay, so that's the way that's going to roll. And I think everybody is okay. We've got 3 hours. So I think we're going to build in a few breaks, as I said, but that should take us right through from now until noon. So before I get you to jump in, let's go to the next slide, Sin. And what you'll see is, Laura told you a little bit about me. This is a little bit about the company I represent, FleishmanHillard. In Canada, we're branded as FleishmanHillard HighRoad. The key takeaway from this slide, it's big. It's a big company, really, it's really big. In total, there are actually over 1,500 communications firms owned by our parent, Omnicom, out of New York. It is the 2nd largest communications holding firm in the world after WPP out of London. And FleishmanHillard is the largest part of that. We're over 80 offices, 30 countries. I've got more than 2,300 colleagues. It's like the old British Empire. Remember the Queen used to say, the sun never sets on the empire. Anyway, she probably said it better than that. But anyway, we do have a lot of offices around the world. And in Vancouver, I work with about 12 colleagues. We provide every facet of public relations and government relations. Government relations, GR, that's kind of a polite way to say lobbying. And so my one and only shameless plug, we're always looking forward to working with wonderful BC-based businesses that are looking to raise their profile. So I'm on LinkedIn if you ever want to talk. So let me turn to people that are on the call. So who's here repping the farthest north winery or property? Farthest north, Lillooet?
Probably me, just outside Kamloops.
Okay, we got Kamloops. Who's further? Anybody further north? Who's anybody further? Okay, I was looking on the map of BC. Is Lillooet further north than Kamloops? We got somebody here from Lillooet? Lillooet person?
We do. I can see your name on the screen. I'm not sure, Helene, if you can if you're hearing us, or if you can turn your mic on. We'd love to see you.
Helene, show us your beautiful face, Helene. She's like, hell no, I'm in my PJs. Is that Helene P that I see? I see the name. She's preferring to remain anonymous at this moment.
You might be going to grab a coffee.
That's true. Okay, so Ashley, you said Kamloops further north, right? That's your story and you're sticking to it?
Yeah.
It's actually, yeah.
And Helene is not here to rep, so we're going with Kamloops as the furthest north. Okay, what about furthest south? Vancouver Island. Anybody? Metro Van, White Rock? Nobody from Metro? I can see Laura, she's trolling the name. She's gonna tag somebody.
We've got
No Metro
Twilight.
Van.
No, oh, hold on. That's
No
not-
Metro Van. Ooh, okay, no Van Isle. Okay, so somebody who's in the South Okanagan then? Who's south in the South Okanagan?
We're in Penticton, but it's funny that that's as far as south as it
Yeah.
is, but there's two of us from Penticton.
Okay, only two from Penticton. Kimberly, I see you waving. Okay, and Krista Lee, fantastic.
We've got Aaron, who's just joined us here from Stag's Hollow down in Okanagan Falls. That might be the furthest south.
Oh, okay. Krista Lee, I can see from your last name that you are BC winery royalty.
I wouldn't go that far. No, I just means we've been doing it a long time and we don't know how to do anything else. That's all.
Well, I'm so glad that you dialed in. That's fantastic. I love seeing your name on there. That's great. Okay, furthest north, furthest south. Who works in the media? Is there anybody who actually actively works in media I need to know this because sometimes they say kind of not nice things about people in media, and I don't want to do that to anybody who's on the call. I just need to know if I need to like temper my, No? Oh, good. Okay, fantastic.
Safe zone, Jackie.
No muzzling me this time. Uh-oh. Okay. What about the most people on a team? I know there's some time people here.
Yep, there's two of us, but
Okay, two on from time. Stag's Hollow. Anybody?
I think there's just the one today. I've got one off today and one had to do bottling, so.
Okay, great. That's great. What about the oldest? Who's repping the oldest winery among this group? The oldest. We shouldn't say oldest. We should say the best, the most established.
Stag's Hollow is 26 years now.
Wow. Anybody top that? Anybody able to top 26? Going once? Going twice? Fantastic. That's amazing. That is fabulous. All
Zoe,
right.
Can I pop in here for a minute? Zoe, how
Yes.
old is Mount Boucherie now?
Hello.
Anybody in the chat?
Oh, there she is.
Yeah. Sorry. Mount Boucherie. So the wine shop was built in 1999, but the vineyards have been established since 1968.
Okay.
68.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
I'm
that's like
terrible at
oldest
math, which is
vineyards.
why I'm in PR. Is that the oldest then? It is, right?
It is, but it's an odd one because the wine shop wasn't built until 1959. So
Okay. All right. So
And
we've got
Helene-
two that we could claim to be the most established. That's great. That's
And
great.
Helene
And
says Helene says that that their winery is the oldest in Lillooet. There we go.
That's very Canadian. Everybody's a winner. Everybody. Fantastic. That's great. And Helene, I did see, Laura, you probably saw it too in the chat. She's having internet issues. So we were thinking she was going and having a coffee and she was madly trying to get connected and reply to us. So Helene, even if you're on just with a blank screen, we're really glad to have you. So thanks. Totally acknowledge that you're there, even if you can't show your face. Happy to have you in the chat. So, okay. Synth, if we go to the next slide, I'm going to jump into the research because I think this is really interesting and important, and this is especially from a communication standpoint. So, I am blessed to do a lot of work with organizations in the tourism sector in BC, and I have Tourism Vancouver as a client. I love them. Oh boy, did we work hard in partnership with TIA BC and Destination BC and BC Hotel Association and others when the pandemic hit. And at the end of last year, the team introduced me to a really interesting resource from the Expedia Media Group. And so I'm wondering how many people have seen, if you want to pop a little note in the chat, anybody seen the Expedia research before? This was done at the end of 2020 with a projection forward through Q1 of 2021. So this is Expedia trolling for information that could be provided to the tourism industry, the tourism sector. Anybody seen it before? Nods? No? Interesting. Okay. Okay. Very cool. That's great. That's great. So I'm going to talk about some other places where we can go for research, but what I found is that this information was super interesting because we all know this. We all know that there's pent-up demand. But what we found, what we saw from what the research showed was that travelers are they're just so bone weary of being trapped in kind of our day-to-day grind that they're looking for travel that hands them rest and rejuvenation. And I thought to myself, what better way to do that than to visit a winery or a wine region? So I wanted to bring this forward to show you some of this really interesting research. So through an analysis of, and I had to look this up because these numbers are beyond my comprehension, through an analysis of big data, and that was 300, here's a new word, that was a new word for me, petabytes of data. So I had to look it up. So I'm going to read this. A terabyte is 1 trillion bytes, and a petabyte is 1,000 terabytes of data. What? All right. It's actually the number 1 followed by 15 zeros. A lot of data. So they analyzed that research through queries and booking patterns of people who were projecting forward for their travel. And they looked at it from their own properties, and they have a whole bunch, right? They've got Expedia, they've got hotels.com, VRBO, Travelocity, Hotwire, Orbitz, and a bunch of others. And they conducted research between Q2 and Q4 of 2020, and there were 3 insights specific to communication that I wanted to share with you. So let's go to the next slide. So now this one is specific to accommodations. And I know that there's not really necessarily anybody on this call that's actually a hotel property per se, but I think that this data is still really relevant for us because it's insight about people, travelers who are going to make decisions about booking events or participating in functions like tours or tastings that are in an inside space, right? So the question that was asked was, what's important for an accommodation to do to help you make a booking decision? And I want you to take a look at the top 5 most important things for travelers on this slide. Right? Look at the top 5. We've got them in colors there. So those top 5 things, 4 of them are related to health and safety, right? COVID protocols. And providing a demonstrably clean space for visitors, right? And I've highlighted another stat a little bit further down and near the bottom of the pile. So of those 13 most important indicators, deals, discounts, and savings don't even make it into the top 10, which I thought was pretty amazing. Don't even make it into the top 10. So moving on to the next one, I saw some information about health and safety. So now specifically when it comes to messaging, I highlighted Expedia's research findings in response to the question, and this is what they asked, when thinking about planning leisure travel in the next 12 months, which, if any, of the following conditions about the destination influence you? Okay. So now pre-pandemic, I'm sure some of us would have been thinking about health regulations and statistics I mean, especially if we were traveling to somewhere exotic. But what I found was the two considerations were really interesting. I've got them circled that they stand out there from before and after, and then pre-pandemic and then pandemic. Audiences want to hear about health regulations, right? They want to know what's going on in a region. Now, whether they follow those regulations or not is a whole different thing, but at least they're wanting to make informed decisions. And that's probably something we've never in this country had to think about before, right? So I thought that was a really kind of illustrative fact of a before and after. People didn't think about it much before. And now when you see those two pale peaks there, that's a huge jump in consideration. So something to bear in mind in terms of our messaging. And we're going to talk about messaging in just a minute. So next slide. This was about planning. So the question that was posed was, when you're planning your trip, where are you getting information? And how has this differed between pre-pandemic and now? Okay. And I'm seeing something from Leanne. Leanne, I'm going to pause for just a minute. Was that something on the previous slide? Laura,
I had
Leanne,
a question. I was wondering when this was collected last year.
Between Q2 and Q4.
So in the summertime generally then, okay. And
that's right. And that's a good question, Leanne. That's interesting because it actually went from the lull of the pandemic, which was in the kind of spring, summer, and then things ramped up and got much worse in the fall, winter.
It would be so interesting if there was the resources to pull people again when tourism opens up again to see if that sentiment is the same. But what I thought was interesting on that previous slide, in addition to the health and safety, there's also a big blip between family before and after.
Can you go back one sense so we can see that previous slide?
Things for my family members to do made a bit of a jump as well, and that has an implication for wineries.
Right.
That was my comment.
Right. Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, not quite as big a jump as the other two, but for sure a difference there, pre-pandemic and going into the pandemic, for sure. Great.
I believe, Ashley, I think we've got a feature list on our Wines of BC Explore app for family-friendly wineries as well. So if your winery is family-friendly, then that's an interesting stat, Leanne, that you've pulled out there. People are looking for that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And that is relevant to the next one, Leanne. That's a perfect segue because Synth, if we move ahead again, I thought that it was interesting. So the question was, when you're planning your trip, where are you getting information and how has this differed between pre-pandemic and now? And I was surprised by this. I was surprised that oh, sorry, Synth, go back one to our, there we go. I was surprised that people wouldn't always be looking at online travel sources, resources. It made me think, what does an increase in prospective visitors seeking out online travel sources, what does that mean for our messaging, right? So clearly, we need to make sure that our materials are visual. And it should be good motivation for making sure that your offering, whatever it may be, is known to key online travel sites in your region, of course, and beyond. So if there was a time where, if you've been toying with an idea for your product, your service, your space, about doing maybe a paid placement, like a pay-per-click strategy online, that's limited to anyone searching, for instance, for wine or wine tours, now may be a really good time to consider making that move. Now that people are making a concerted and increased effort to find that information online, if you've been thinking about employing that kind of a strategy, it feels from this data as if now would be a very good time to do that. Okay. And then going to the next one, Synth, thanks. Then insights into action. And I thought that this was really useful. At the end of the Expedia document, they had 3 insights. And I'm going to give you just a minute to review those. Okay, so I'm going to shut up and let you take a look. So we know that there's pent-up demand, but that demand, it's really interesting per the 3, kind of snapshots of the research here. What they found was that travelers were leaning towards booking travel that they saw as restful, right? And giving travelers an opportunity to relax and recharge, as opposed to travelers looking for, kind of action and adventure. Okay? So prospective visitors also, from the snapshot you can see, they want to hear you say that you have put strong measures in place to protect their health. Okay? Cleanliness and rigor in the way that work is being done is really important. And then the third insight, the advice is that now is a really good time to make sure that our messaging is reinforcing our pandemic protocols. And I know that wineries, my conversations with Laura, that many of you, all of you really have pivoted to make sure that, there's things like less people in a space and contactless interactions, and making sure that our information is in a variety of places where our prospective visitors are looking. That is going to be critical. So really interesting to look at that. Any questions? I mean, I'm not from Expedia, so I don't know that I'll be able to answer, but any observations there on what those 3 action insights are, or what they could mean to your facility? Are you find you're heading in that direction anyway, or were you aware of the fact that prospective visitors are really more about rest and relaxation than they are about action and adventure? Any thoughts? Happy to have you unmute. And
I don't know, like, I think there's a certain level of, I'm getting that tone online anyway, a certain level of boredom right now. So like, while yes, people are tired and they want to rejuvenate and recharge, they're also, especially since the recent lockdown, I think they're feeling a bit bored because they can't travel outside certain boundaries. So I'm getting a sort of fatigue on the board front. So like from our end, that's why we're trying to really talk about how a lot of our wineries have done brilliant jobs, like kind of recreating winery experiences. We don't call them trips, we call them experiences. It's something to kind of stimulate the spirit and physically try to motivate them, not just, yeah. So I think I do think that there is a need for that.
Yeah. And that's interesting, Ashley. Bearing in mind, I think you're right. The research was done, the last part of last year, and the first part of the new year in 2021 is a different, right? Whoever thought that this was going to go into what now is feeling like most of a second year, and for us to be locked down again so tightly in some areas, I hear you about the boredom factor. For sure. Any other observations on those 3 insights? Okay. So now I'm going to move on, and it's great to know that that's what the research is telling us, but where do we start in terms of building our own messaging? So Synth, let's go to the next slide, and we're going to talk about developing your messaging and some best practices around that. So if we think back to what the research said that audiences wanted, what they wanted and needed to hear, you would want to overlay that intel some of those points into the messaging that you develop. And what's the best way to be able to do that? And I honestly do what's exactly on that sheet there. I break a page into 3 columns, and in the first column, you want to be really clear about what the most important thing is that you want to say about what you have to offer. A product, a service, an event, whatever that thing is that you're trying to highlight or promote, right? You want to be able to crystallize that in your mind, whether you're going to be the spokesperson, we're going to talk about being a spokesperson, whether you're going to be the spokesperson or whether you're developing this messaging for someone else in your organization that is going to be a spokesperson, right? I've found it extremely useful to do something very much like what's here, where you literally have 3 columns on a page. And the first is very succinct. It's your key message. And your key message should include your USP, right? It's a bit of communications jargon for those of us who work in the industry. What is your unique selling proposition? What makes you different? And it can be a small thing, it can be a large thing. We're the biggest, we're the newest, we're organic, we've got a varietal that's unusual. What is your USP? The media will always be looking for the new. So start with your key messages. What are the most important things you want to say about your product, service, organization, right? And we know that with those messages in mind, you're not going to be able to say everything you want to say within those few short words. And that's where the second column, which are your secondary messages, that's where they come into play. So what can you add to those key points you want to raise that back it up, that make those comments more fulsome or more complete or more robust? They can help you kind of further illustrate or build up or explain your USP, what's unique about you, what's important. And remember, in creating your messaging, you should be answering some, if not all, of those kind of 5 W's in that process. The who, the what, the where, the when, and the why. Right? It's important too to think about your audience, and we're going to come back to that as well, and put them at the center of your messaging. Right? It's not about what the media wants to hear. It's not really even about your other external forces. You want to think about what's the most important thing that I want to say to the audience members that I'm trying to attract. Okay. Keep that at the center. And then the final column there, and this one I'm going to flag for you. This is the most important, and it's also in communication the most overlooked, although we're getting better at it, and that is proof points. What? Yes, proof points. So think about the fact that a lot of people in our industry will be saying the same types of things. There's a number of us that are organic, there's a number that are bigger, smaller, there's some of us are doing the same types of varietals, etc. But the proof points are what stick with people, and those are the facts. Those are the verifiable numbers. Those are some of the best proof points are third-party conferred recognition. So yes, they are still valid and important. Things like awards, special recognitions. If we have people in our organization that have had accolades about the work that they do, those are all really valid and very strong as proof points. And as we're talking, I'm going to try and see if I can quickly pull out a document that I have that actually shows proof points. Have I got one here? I think I do. Yes, yay. Okay. I'm going to give you an example of what I'm talking about in terms of key messages and proof points and why proof points are so valuable. So this is my fake organization. It is not from the sector. It is Muffler Pro. I don't know why Muffler Pro, it just is. So Muffler Pro is an organization, and their key message is Muffler Pro is committed to environmentally responsible practices. Okay, that's a good key message. That's real, it's true, it's defendable, but it's also kind of white noise, right? You wouldn't pay any attention to an organization that was saying that they've got environmentally responsible practices, because who doesn't? Now, I'm going to read you some of Muffler Pro's proof points about their commitment to environmentally responsible practices. So here's proof point number 1. Muffler Pro dedicates 5% of our pre-tax profit to 6 different Canadian environmental charities, one in each of the 6 regions across the country where we operate. All right, number 2, proof point number 2. Muffler Pro is the founding member of a national coalition of auto service providers, which last year collected and recycled 18.5 tons of used metals. That's strong, that's valid, that's real, those are numbers. Proof point number 3, all 125 Muffler Pro locations across Canada have adopted a 14-point green strategy, which has reduced our collective carbon footprint by 58% over the last 3 years. Now, the key message is Muffler Pro is committed to environmentally responsible practices. So there's a really interesting debate in coaching and training right now where there's a lot of trainers that are saying to organizations, forget your key messages. Nobody listens to them anyway. They're not real differentiators, and they're not a great way to be able to deliver a message. The better thing to do is to work inside your organization and to dig deep and find the numbers. Find your proof points, because those numbers, those statistics, that data is going to work much better for you and become much more memorable, much more motivational to your audiences than your key messages or your secondary messages. And I want to point out here, just for a moment, that Laura, the Wine Growers BC website, where you have a top 10 things that you need to know about the industry in BC. They are fantastic, and they are so fantastic in part because they are proof point laden. And in fact, they should be relevant and valid for all of you. All right. So it's a fabulous resource. If you're looking to try and figure out where you can have some proof points for the industry, go to the resource section on WGBC and take a look. There's a ton of information there, but those top 10 things you should know are amazing and really, really useful. So there's a starter kit for proof points right there. Now,
thanks, Jackie. The media kit as well has got all of those top 10 and more. So there you
excellent.
go. Great.
Excellent. It's great content. It's great stuff. And there's no reason why, as members, you've contributed to those statistics. You should be using them, right? Think at a higher level and pull that information into your messaging. Now, going back to what the Expedia research was telling us, we'd also want to think about making sure that we're spotlighting or highlighting cleanliness for our audiences, right? So we're not just going to say we're keeping it clean to protect your health, because that's a key message and nobody's going to pay attention to that. What we do want to say is something more like, tell me how often. Is that every 15 minutes? Is that after every tour? Is that, I'm making this up, we fog our eating area at the end of every day. What is the thing that we do? I know that you've reduced group sizes. There are some that are already evident. You've reduced group sizes from 25 to 10 or to 6, or the season for patio dining is just about here. We're looking forward to welcoming local families, at outdoor tables for al fresco dining, right? So being able to build in that messaging that has that COVID overlay. We know visitors are looking for it. So let's try and get it in there, at least in the foreseeable future. And then, of course, when we have our content together, we're going to practice your content delivery so that you can internalize the messaging. And I think that sometimes people really kind of get nervous about trying to figure out what their messaging is. But at the end of the day, I tell a lot of clients, you know this stuff, right? You know this information about your industry, about your winery. You might have to have a little note jotted down to jog your memory about numbers in your proof points. But overall, you definitely know this information about your own organization, your own product or service. And you know a million times more than any journalist does about it. So don't be intimidated by your own knowledge. Any questions about that? Any questions about the research? Any questions about, I'm interested to know if people have, if folks on the phone, have you changed your messaging in terms of what you're saying to audiences? And I don't mean just COVID related, that's obvious, but are you trying to do things differently in any way in terms of your outreach, in terms of the way that you're communicating or who you're communicating to? So anybody got anything to share about that?
Jackie, can you give us an example of how someone may change how they're communicating or where or? Yeah.
Well, I'm wondering things like, have you created a new strategy for a different kind of outreach? Have you created a new campaign that's got new information? And I know every season is a new season, and you know, where we might have different varietals or bottling differently or putting new products to market. But are there bigger things? And here's one of the questions I'm previewing. One of the questions that I had developed is, during this pandemic slowdown, did that give you an opportunity to do anything differently that you maybe hadn't had the time to do before, right? Has the pandemic provided an opportunity to do anything unique or different, or allowed you to put a new strategy in play that you might not have had time or the ability to do before? Any thoughts on that?
Here at Monty Creek, with us being a smaller team, when the pandemic kind of caused things to slow down with visitors to the tasting room, that our e-commerce, the sales through our website, was an opportunity for us that we hadn't really had a lot of time to develop in the past. So that was a change this, kind of year and a bit, for us.
Right. That's a really good one, Ashley. E-commerce. E-commerce. Has anybody else found a pickup in that regard? Anybody pivoted to Erin? I see you saying yes, definitely.
We were actually kind of lucky. We had already planned for a new website, and that also helped improve we moved over to Wine Direct last February. So it was just prior to the pandemic. So it was happy we did that at the time we did, because then our e-commerce shot up. We were 400% over previous year on e-commerce. So
wow,
helped offset a little bit of the other stuff. So
there's some good proof points, Erin. And
exactly right.
Kimberly has her hand up as well.
Yeah, it was just a note to that is we were able to actually invest in staff training with DTC symposiums and things like that. We normally wouldn't have had a big block of time to be able to do that. And those key findings enabled us to launch Commerce 7, which is going to be a much more fulsome platform than we normally would have jumped into, just because we had to look at creative ways of marketing our sales strategy. But the other thing I was going to mention too, as far as messaging goes, is we're finding we're using the word safe a lot now. in our messaging when it's radio sound bites or anything on our social platforms, because that's something that people are reacting very strongly to.
That's amazing. So Kimberly, that's exactly in line with those findings on those slides from Expedia, right? People want to hear that. I mean, it feels like it should be obvious, but people want that reassurance, right? Yeah. Yeah. Who else has changed their messaging to be more, has anybody else had those same experiences that you've pivoted on what you're talking about in terms of safety or distancing or cleanliness?
One of the things that we had to pivot pretty hard on with this last regulation is we basically, even though we were still allowed to have sampling indoors, we really tried to focus on the outdoors and outdoor experiences specifically. And that's something that we really latched onto, because again, that feeling of, you know, boredom, it's healthy to get outside. I mean, those are what our PHOs are telling us. I think that was sort of a new thing we latched onto beyond the just, you know, stay local, sip safely, which are all very, very important messages, but that outdoors is safer connection, even though now we're hearing we have to also be safe outdoors too. But regardless, it's just something that people kind of crave. And I think with wineries having these beautiful outdoor spaces, and there, a lot of them have had to pivot really hard to create those and expand those. And we have the vineyards and vineyard walks. I think they've really latched onto that. And I think that's something that's appealing to our consumers. It's what I'm seeing online anyways.
And that's something that is maybe what we're talking about here is it's common to all of you at wineries, but what an amazing USP, unique selling point, right? People can come to your spaces and see what you do outside and be safe in doing that, right? I mean, it's fascinating, and it gets better and better and more appealing as the weather gets better and better. But even now with spring, with bud break, we know that, you know, that might be a bit of a platform for messaging, right? To entice people into the area, into your space, outdoor spaces. And absolutely, that's very consistent with the messaging that we're getting from the provincial health officer as well, right? That everybody should be, or outside as much as possible. Although if you were in the Lower Mainland right now, some of the outside spaces in the Lower Mainland are completely ridiculous in terms of overcrowding. So I'm envying you. When I see the pictures, Aaron, the background that you've selected, and Ashley, your background too. And Laura, I wish that I was there right now. No, wait, not right now, because I'm happy to be here with you. But when you see the crowding down south, it looks absolutely gorgeous. So great. Okay, I'm taking a quick time check. We've got 9:50. I'm gonna go for another few minutes, and then I want to take a break between 9:55 and 10, just to let people get up and stretch their legs and refresh coffees, do a bio break, and then come back at 10. So let's go to the next slide. Since if we're looking at, and I'll go through part of this about the role of a spokesperson, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll come back to it, okay? So let's talk about this for just a bit. Who is a spokesperson? And by the way, I love these little guys with the, you know, semi-body figures and their little, I love that guy with his little bum and the guy with no clothes except a tie. It's so cute. So now, and I don't recommend that any of you do this, by the way. I don't want you to think that that's appropriate, but I like the figures. Anyway, a spokesperson. Who is a spokesperson in an organization? Well, it is anyone. It is anyone who speaks to any external audience. So think about who you offer in any Q&A situation. And I think the most important thing there is, are they an appropriate person to be carrying your message and to be speaking on behalf of your organization? And it's something that a lot of organizations struggle with. I'm going to give you an example. I worked in health for years, and I had a new CEO that came in, and he knew, he was the CEO. He knew he should be the primary spokesperson for the organization. What he didn't tell me and what I didn't know is that, and what I found out later, he hated being in front of the media. He was terrified, petrified of it. But as a guy and as a CEO, he didn't want to say that to anybody. So I would set up media opportunities for him and he would find an excuse not to convert, right? Suddenly he was not in town or called to an emergency or something. So a fit with a spokesperson goes both ways. The person who may naturally be at the head of an organization is not necessarily the person who should be your spokesperson, be speaking on behalf of your organization, right? It should be someone who is able to really synthesize the most important, current information from your organization. They've got to be ready and willing to speak on your behalf. They've got to do it effectively. And this can be for any opportunity, not just strictly media. And it's a big responsibility. Being a spokesperson is really a big responsibility, right? That person has to be able to really convey your USP, right? Your unique selling proposition. And talk authentically and convincingly about what makes your product or service or space, what makes you stand out from the rest of the pack, from your competitors. And it's important to figure out that niche, right? And we're going to talk about what media are looking for, but I can tell you it's important to figure out what niche you're in and then to in terms of speaking in pictures, think about making what you say visual. Okay? That's really helpful from a spokesperson perspective. So, do you grow grapes in a field that's a hectare large? Now, you probably all know exactly the size of a hectare, but if I'm a layperson and I'm listening to messaging, and I'm just using this as an example, if I'm listening to messaging, I would rather hear that, or I can visualize it better if you say that the space dedicated to your special varietal is the size of 2 CFL football fields, including the end zones, which is 1.07 hectares, right? So if you think about talking in pictures, that makes what you're saying much more engaging for your audience, for the people receiving the information. And I want to pause here and talk about, and maybe we'll do this and then we'll take our break. So I'm checking the time. No, you know what? Let's pause here. I've got 9:55. So I'm going to come back to speaking in pictures and the slide. But why don't we take 5? Okay. Come back at 10 o'clock. Refresh coffees, etc. Okay.
Perfect. Thanks, Jackie.
Okay.
See you soon.
Okay. Robbie, I was seeing your name on there and wondering if you were the only brave and bold male to be on this session today. Are you representing for your entire gender, dude?
Well, that puts no pressure on me whatsoever.
So glad to see you. Thank you for taking
you.
on that role.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for letting me in, he says. Laura, I don't know, I can't see everybody. Is Robbie truly the only brave male, the one guy representing?
I believe he is.
Robbie.
We made him.
Well done.
Some family ties on the call.
Great stuff.
Robbie, have you had much media training in the past?
Not much. So this is all very new to me. So I'm kind of looking forward to hearing kind of a more in-depth and professional standpoint of it. It's kind of picking that up as you go along and trying not to make catastrophic mistakes. So it's nice to hear.
Good. I know it's an intimidating thing, Jackie. Yeah,
it is. It is.
I can speak just on behalf of, when you're speaking on behalf of a winery, or in our case for Ashley and I, on behalf of many member wineries, there's a lot of pressure we know what we're talking about, but you really don't want to put your foot in your mouth, right? And that's the biggest fear to overcome.
Let me go into my calendar, because I don't. We're on a Wines of British Columbia. Video.
I thought she was.
Kimberly's talking to somebody, but it's actually not us.
Right.
Oh dear. It's all good. Oh, I hope she doesn't say anything terrible. No, Laura, you're right.
That's what this training is all about.
Being a spokesperson, and Robbie, to your point, being a spokesperson it's tough. It's a huge responsibility. To my earlier story there about the CEO who knew that he was supposed to be able to do it and was tasked with it, but it was just personally for him. He was a very, very introverted person, and I wish it was relatively early on in my career. I wish I had actually read the signals better. Like after the first or second time that he didn't show up for an interview, or he gave me some excuse that sounded a little bit contrived, I shouldn't have kept going. I should have realized, okay, I have a CEO who is not willing to speak. I should have pivoted. And instead, I kind of thought, because I personally do not have, I'm lucky. Oh, and you know what it is? It is, oh, am I going to remember? I think it's called glossophobia. Like glossophobia, the fear of speaking in public. Glossophobia. And I brand new, I've been doing this for 30 years, brand new word for me that I looked up a few months ago. But that's the fear of speaking in public. I personally, thankfully, have never felt that. So I didn't internalize what he could have been feeling in terms of his fear. And so I just kept, finding opportunities for him to speak, and he kept not showing up. And it was not a good relationship for either of us. So that was the end of that. Anyway, being a spokesperson for an organization. So I think the most important lesson to be learned there is that there's got to be a good fit between the person, the task, and their willingness to do it, right? It's got to be a real confluence of positive factors that come together to make a great spokesperson. And the other thing about what makes a spokesperson great is that they just practice. They just do it over and over and over and over. And I ask people from time to time, I do a lot of presentation training as well. And I say, who's the best presenter or the best media person you've ever seen? And there's always, personalities that, and I say to them, how many times do you think Tony Robbins has ever got up in front of an audience, or Barack Obama, or, other Oprah or others? How many times has that person got up and done what they do? And you realize that it is just the doing it that makes you better and better and better and better. It's like anything, like learning to play chess, like learning to play tennis, like learning a new language, right? So it's important to do that practicing. Speaking of practice, everybody knows TED Talks, right? TED, like TED Talks. Okay, there is a woman, and I'm gonna lean on the group here to look up her name. Has anybody seen the woman who was a neurologist? She was a brain, she knew about the brain, and her particular area of expertise was about strokes. And she suffered a stroke. And she, because of her expertise and because of her training and her background, she knew she was having it when she was having it. And she does this TED Talk that is unbelievable. It's absolutely unbelievable. And I think it's called a stroke of insight. Kimberly, you're nodding. That's the one, right? What's that doctor's name? She's a woman. You're putting it in the chat?
Yeah, Jill Bolt, B-O-L-T-E, Taylor. Jill Bolt Taylor.
It's yes.
My stroke of insight.
Yes. Has anybody seen that TED Talk?
Yeah.
Have you seen it, Kimberly?
Yeah.
No, I'm going to after though, on my lunch.
Okay, Catherine, you've seen it?
I have. It was like a year and a bit ago that I saw it, but it was fantastic.
So it's been out there for a while. She wrote a book about her experience, but it is unbelievable. So she's on her own, she's suffering a stroke. She knows she's suffering a stroke. She knows that speed is absolutely critically important. And there's a point to this story, by the way, guys, there's a point to this. She knows that speed to get help is critically important. And so she forces herself to get to a telephone, and she's phoning somebody that she knows she needs to get to. And she's struggling to get the numbers out. She tells this story and you are at the edge of your seat. It is amazing. Now, the point that I want to make about this is that she practiced her TED Talk hundreds of times before she gave it. And she's given it hundreds of times since, similar talks. But when you see her do that TED Talk, you feel as if she is doing it for the first time. And she had done it, she had practiced and practiced. She was nervous about speaking. She was nervous about delivering it as a TED Talk. And so she forced herself to just go through it and go through it and go through it and go through it before she delivered it. And I tell you, she's like crying. Everybody in the audience is like crying, and it feels like she's doing it for the first time. And she had just practiced it till she was, and I'm not talking about being manipulative. It was still 100% authentic, but it is so powerful. And speaking of powerful, the other one and this was from a few years ago, not too many. Who's seen Amy Cuddy? People know the name Amy Cuddy, Power Pose. Anybody seen? No, nobody's seen Amy Cuddy? Catherine?
I haven't seen her, but I've heard about it. And the power of like standing in front of the mirror before an interview and putting yourself broad-chested and the like neurological responses in the brain that get associated with that.
Exactly. That's excellent. So Amy Cuddy is another one that delivers this, powerful TED Talk. And she was the same way. She did years of research. And just so people know, Catherine and I'll let you in, and Catherine's done an excellent job describing it. She started to do research about the impact of the way you carry yourself on the endorphins in your brain. And she came up with the theory of power posing. And that is, she talks of one of the things that she found that was absolutely fascinating. There are some universal things that humans do. And one of the, by way of example, somebody who runs across a finish line or accomplishes a task will raise their arms in victory, even if they're blind from birth and have never seen anybody ever do that again, or ever do that, like as an example, right? There are some universal gestures, etc., that human beings will adopt and will display, even if there's no way that they've seen them before. And so Amy took that thinking about universal gestures, and then she looked to see what impact gestures had. So her power posing, what she came up with was power posing, and how if you stand, and Catherine, you said this, chest forward, shoulders back, confident. She calls it the Superwoman pose, where you put you can't see all of my body, and you put your hands on your hips and look like Superwoman, right? If you do that, what happens is it releases all sorts of positive neurological transmissions in your brain. And she says, do it before, to Catherine's point, do it before a job interview, a media interview. Do it when you're going into a situation where you have some fear or trepidation. You're not going to do this in front of the media, just to be clear. You want to do it. Maybe she says, go into the bathroom and go and do 5 or 6 power poses, and then come on out and do what you need to do. And you are going to feel smarter, more confident, stronger in having done those poses. Now, what you'll see if you Google Amy Cuddy, C-U-D-D-Y, what you'll find is that she went through a very tough period. She also does an amazing TED Talk where she breaks down and cries at the end, and everybody in the audience is crying. But that's not just the only TED Talks that I watch, by the way, but it seems to be a theme. Anyway, what she does say is that she, for years, went through this research, and when she put her research out, there was a lot of people. First, everybody was like, oh, Amy Cuddy. And then there was a real backlash against her, where people said she faked her research. And, I think it was a bit of a gender thing. And then over the successive years, and we're talking probably a 10-year period, she was vindicated. And other researchers have been able to replicate a lot of what her original findings were. So think about power posing before you go into your interview. So there's a couple of great TED Talks that that would be useful in this regard. Now, let's go back to talking about spokespeople. And we were on the slide there that shows our little guy with the no clothes and the tie. We talked about speaking in pictures. Try and think of describing things in ways that bring a visual aspect to it. But, Laura and I were talking as we were both prepping for this session. And one thing, Laura, that you said, and we talked about this, and I really wanted to bring it forward because I think it's really important. And that is, and I'm just double checking, we said there was nobody in the works in the media on this session. So I'm going to say some things now about the media. Okay, so people who have a tendency to choose to work in the media, they're a little bit off kilter, right? I'm really hoping there's nobody. Now you know why I was asking. Okay, so it's a certain personality that wants to work in the media, right? Often they can be real curmudgeons, right? It's very much like, prove it to me, right? And they can often be a certain personality that, let me put it another way. Trained journalists, taking the personal out of this, trained journalists come often to a topic with a degree of skepticism, right? A degree of skepticism, especially when they're in front of a spokesperson, because they expect that spokesperson to be a bit of a salesperson, right? Maybe you're going to embellish the truth a little. You're only really going to talk about the positive things and not the negative. It's the media's job to hold you to account, to verify what you're saying is factual and true. And it's interesting because as a spokesperson, what you need to bear in mind going into an interview, and I describe it this way, you're often starting in a hole, okay? You're often, from the journalist's perspective, starting from not a great place, okay? They're coming into it being skeptical. So, let me say one more thing about the media before I go on. Also, what sells? What sells stories? Hands up here. Throw out some stuff. What do people put forward the most in the media for stories? What sells?
Negative news.
Well, I was like, yeah, if it bleeds, it leads.
Yes, Ashley, totally. You must be, are you in PR? Are you in PR, Ashley? Yeah.
Actually trained as a journalist, transitioned into marketing and PR.
I love people in media. They're lovely. They're wonderful. They're warm human beings. I think they're terrific. I just had to throw that out there. You know what? That is a wonderful old adage. If it bleeds, it leads, right? So it doesn't matter what else is in the publication. You're always going to put the terrible, difficult, hard stuff at the front. If it bleeds, it leads. And that pushes other things off the pages of the paper. That's an old-fashioned way of putting it, but that will knock out the good news stories, right? So knowing as a spokesperson, so here you're getting a leg up here as a spokesperson, and knowing that media will lead with the negative because it sells, because they're seeing you from a skeptical viewpoint. What you don't want to do is go in and talk about a crisis, a terrible thing, unless, of course, you know, if your property has burned to the ground, I do not expect you to not talk about that. But think about the fact that if you say, the flooding that's taken place in some areas is going to be so difficult for us this year, you know that will be the theme for days or weeks or months or maybe even the entire season for your industry, for your sector, if you're speaking on behalf, right? If you say, you know, there's been this bad thing that's happened and we can't find enough field hands and we're not going to be able to get our, you know, product to market, then that's a negative theme that might find its way into coverage of your industry for a period of time. And that's not where we want to be. Are there impacts? Of course there are. Are some of those impacts difficult to overcome? Of course some of them are. But I would always coach to say, don't end with a negative, end with a positive. It's been a difficult year to do X, but the upside of that is Y, right? Or it's been this difficult thing has happened that's had an impact as per A, but here's the upside of that, and that's B, right? So it's important to not just dwell on the negative, because that will end up being the dominant theme, and that's not where you want to be. Often because some of those things that are impacting us are very temporary. They happen for a month out of the year, a week out of the year. But if you're a bit of a sad sack in front of the media, that may end up being the dominant theme, and that is not what you want to do as a spokesperson for your property or your product, your service, or for your industry. Laura, I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to add to that about from a spokesperson's perspective. And you know, wait a minute, before you say anything, Laura, one of the things that I forgot to say off the top is when we do our little interviews, yes, we are going to do a couple of little interviews at the end. When we do our interviews, this is going to be a double-edged sword, because Robbie, if anybody ends up being a bit of a superstar, you know that Laura is going to come after you, right? Just say, you know that Laura is going to come after you and want you to speak as in her stable, in her special stable of spokespeople for the industry. So double-edged sword, just putting it out there. You may be so good that you end up getting roped into doing it, you know, on multiple occasions. So going back though to making sure you have an upside to a downside, Laura, anything that you wanted to add to that? Because that was an important point.
Yeah, I would just add to that because there are crises that happen in our industry, like the wildfires and the floods, and those and media grasp onto those, looking for a story, and I mean you can't ignore it. But I would say in those situations when you are addressing the issue, just keep it factual. Know what you're saying. Don't speculate and speak on behalf of anyone, but what you are experiencing, because what you might be experiencing might not be what your neighbor or what someone in a different region might be experiencing, and just being mindful of all the wineries who fall into that category, and that you are in one area, but what you're saying will reflect on the industry, as Jackie said, and it'll filter out. So just keep it factual. You can't ignore it. You can't deflect what is obviously in everyone's face if there is a fire in the backyard, but just keep to what you know, and it's so easy to go off and speculate sometimes, but just keep it simple, and then look on the, like Jackie said, end on a positive if you can find a positive, but know what you're saying in advance too, and it's okay to call that media person back if you need a few minutes to check your facts or to check what's going on. You don't need to answer anything on the spot. You can call back. You can make sure you've got your notes in place.
And we're going to talk about when to own a question and when not to own a question. Laura. So absolutely. Yeah, that's great.
Question, Jackie, how do you feel about using, like, say, in a crisis situation, using like a positive call to action as a way to uplift the situation? For example, frosts that are happening in France, we talk about, go ahead and purchase French wine, etc. That kind of messaging that's like directed towards the consumer.
Okay, I think I was following you until we were talking about French wines instead of BC wines.
It's okay.
A positive call to action out of something negative, or
so you've got a negative situation, but you can think that we're having a rough time. This is what's going on right now, but here's what would help us.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. Yes. I'm trying to think of even a more positive way to spin that. And maybe something that is, so something that is negative in a moment or in an instant can be framed as being negative in that instant, but then in a wider frame, talking about being positive about the future, right? So maybe if there's something that's difficult for a region or your certain property in a moment, is there a way to say, we're experiencing this difficulty, but maybe broaden it? Over the last 10 years, we've had this happen 1 or 2 times, and we've always been able to bounce back. Or this is an issue that we have from time to time, but we know that the resolution for this is X. Is that, could either of those work? Like almost like saying that there's a problem, but putting forward your own solution, right? Is that?
Yep.
I hear what you're saying about a call to action, and creating a call to action is really important. And I don't actually know if I have this on one of my slides coming up, but embedding a call to action. No, let me back up. When you do an interview, what's the point, right? What's the point? So going into the interview, it's good to know what you want the outcome to be. So it's, you practice and you prep and you put together your messaging and you identify your spokesperson gets all ready to go, and they get out there and they deliver the message. That's really great. but don't deliver the message without knowing what your call to action is. And the call to action is thinking about, what do you want the reader, the listener, the viewer to do after they hear your interview, right? And sometimes it's not much, but it can probably always be, come to the website. It can probably always be, look for our brand among all of the amazing BC brands of wine that are out there. It could almost always be, come and see the property for yourself. Come and enjoy what we've been describing, right? So when you're in that interview situation, you definitely want to go in at the front end, knowing what you want to achieve out of it at the back end. And that is exactly to your point, what's the call to action? So I'm trying to think of, I mean, I don't know if that quite answers it, because you talked about it being a negative situation and having a positive call to action, but I would say you always want a call to action going into your interview. Is that okay?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah, call to action, very important. All right. Deadlines on this same slide, and we will move a little bit faster on this same slide. Deadlines. It's really important to make sure that if you commit to getting something to media by a certain period of time, you've got to do it. You've got to do it. And I say it's important to ask those three little words that media love to hear, and they love to hear it because, and I'm going to look to Ashley to be able to back me up here. When you're somebody who works in media and you have a spokesperson say, "What's your deadline?" That's really powerful, because it kind of indicates that the person who you're talking to gets it, right? They get the fact that you're under a degree of pressure, that you have a commitment, that you've got a deadline that you've got to meet. And so if somebody says, "What's your deadline?" it automatically kind of brings you into into their ecosystem, understanding who it is, who they are, and what they do, and how important that deadline is. And by the way, I know that I've worked with lots of organizations who have said, "Oh, the media's coming calling. Let's just, put our heads down, put the fox cover over the, we don't want to talk to them. They'll go away." Well, they will maybe go away, but what they won't do is not do the story. So by ignoring media, there is something that happens, and that is, if you don't step up and tell your truth, they will find someone else to tell your truth for you, right? So in other words, if they come to Laura because they want to know something about what's happening in the Okanagan, well, maybe Laura, you're all over BC. But if they can't get comment from BC wine growers, they might get comment from Washington State wine growers, feeling as if the conditions are pretty much the same, right? Or they might go to and ask about Oregon wineries or Idaho wineries, rather, if we don't step up and tell our truth, right? So nature abhors a vacuum. If media come looking for something from you, if they don't get it from you, they're going to get it either from your competitor, or they're going to get it from someone that is nimble and steps up to be able to provide them with the information they need. What doesn't happen is that they don't do the story, right? It's not like, "Oh, Laura wasn't available. We won't do a story about wines of BC this year." Doesn't happen. So that's important to know. It's important to be responsive and to make sure that if we've made a commitment, we make good on that commitment. Okay. Is that all okay? Okay. Let's go to the next slide, because I think this is the slide that Robbie was referring to in terms of preparing for an interview. And I say interview, but all of this, everything I'm saying is just as true for any Q&A type situation, right? It could be a presentation, it could be a conversation with investors, it could be, any situation that you find yourself being, giving people the opportunity to ask you questions. You should be going into that event knowing exactly what it is that you want to say. And when I do all this coaching, I never say ignore the questions. I never say that. That is not a recipe for success. But what you do want to do is to acknowledge the question and use every question as a platform for being able to deliver your message. right? And a well-versed spokesperson is able to do that, right? So right off the top, I have, ask cues. You have a right, if you're a spokesperson, you have a right to ask the media some questions. Like, and this is, Laura, this is going to sound so, this is the world that you and I live in every day. And if anybody else reps for a property or a brand, right? You're going to, we call it negotiating the interview, right? You're going to say, what's the story about? Who else are you talking to? When and where? What's your deadline? And then you're able, and why are we doing that? Why are we doing that? Why is it important to arm yourself with asking a few questions, getting the answers? What are some thoughts on that? Why is that important? Why does it matter? It matters because you're going to tailor your messages, right? You're going to, if you know the story that is coming out of that the reporter is coming to you about, you're going to be able to think strategically about building your messaging, right? You're going to want to think about who your, if you know the angle of the story and you know who else they've talked to, that's going to give you a pretty good sense of where the story may be coming from. And then research. So it's going to sound dorky, but what does a reporter do when they're assigned a story and they're coming to you? You know what the first thing they do is? It's the first thing that we all do. Google it. So if you've asked a couple of questions and you know what the story is about, Google the issue. And that will give you a pretty good sense of anticipating the questions, right? If you simply Google the issue, the most recent information about a topic will come up. You're pretty much assured of what kind of questions the reporter is going to be asking you. And anticipating those questions, again, helps you create some smart messaging. It's also good to know the format. How is this going to take place? If you've got a media opportunity, are they going to show up on your doorstep with a camera? Are they going to interview you as a Zoom call? Are they going to have you come to a studio? What is, pre and post pandemic, what is the format for the interview? That makes a difference. It makes a big difference, right? And I'll tell you one thing, if you have media show up at your location, one of the most important things you can do is negotiate where you're situated. Don't just let the camera person say, I want you over here. And I'll tell you why. And I don't think this is, I'm not going to say this is as nefarious for the types of stories that you might be involved in because you're in a specific sector and it's mostly, I imagine most of this is going to be about tourism and wine products, etc. Maybe a bit more complementary than adversarial. But I had a client who had a new, who was pioneering a few years ago, a new method of logging. And the reporter said, and the camera person said, can you stand over here? And the representative from the timber block stood at a certain position. And when we saw the interview on TV, we saw that what had happened is the camera person, as the rep was speaking and talking about their great new practice, their innovation and their very selective harvesting and how they leave most of the forest standing, the camera person was zooming in over their shoulder on a block of land behind the rep that was absolutely clear cut. It was absolutely clear cut. I mean, there was a scar on the earth. What happened then was that the camera person was showing something that was a wood block that did not belong to them and they had no touch on, but it basically negated everything that rep was saying just by showing that picture over their shoulder. Had the rep turned around and taken a look, he could have said, I'd rather stand this way because the wood block on this side is ours, right? So being aware of your surroundings when you're engaged in an interview is critically important. I worked for years in this market with Bell when they were making their entry into the West, and they were a sponsor of the Olympics. And so we used to have their senior people outside talking about, you know, their commitment to the Olympics all the time. And I tell you, everywhere we looked, we saw the damn animals from TELUS, right? The fluffy kittens, the little lion, the hippos, oh, the damn animals. They were everywhere, right? And we were constantly saying to the execs at Bell, turn around, no, don't stand there, stand on that street corner, don't get the TELUS friendly animals behind us, the future is friendly, turn this way, turn that way. So being aware of your surroundings, really important, really important. Okay, prepping for an interview. So that's about you, and I'm making sure that we've, yes, format and practice. And I'm going to come back to practice, practice, practice all the time. Your audience, what's important to them in terms of what you have to say, that is relevance. Relevance is everything. And I'm going to give you an example of that. Okay, People magazine, right? We've all seen People magazine. So the editors of People magazine did a survey. This is going back a few years and the numbers might have nudged around slightly, but they did a survey of their subscribers. I want you to give me your guesses on the gender split. Okay, the gender split, People magazine. So male to female. Unmute, give me some ideas. What do you think? Gender split between male and female as the primary purchaser of People magazine. What do you think? Gender split, male to female.
70% female.
70% female. Okay, got some other ones?
I was gonna say 80.
Kimberly's at 80. Anybody else?
All prices right this and say 82.
71.
Robbie said he's doing a Price is Right on this one. He's going for 82. Oh, Twyla. Twyla. Okay, Robbie. Twyla just capped you. She's got 90. 90%. Anything? Anybody else? Anybody else? Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Twyla, you got it. You got it. In fact, People magazine, the editors of People magazine estimated their gender split on their reader base, their primary audience base, as being more than 90% women, more than 90% female, right? It was more like 93 or 94%. So what does that mean for every single bit of content in People magazine? What does that mean for every single story, advert, picture? What does that mean when you know that that's the audience?
The tone of the
Yeah.
message.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Language.
Every single piece of content is going to be put through, Kimberly, through that female filter, right? That female lens. So if it's not relevant to that female audience, it's not going to make it into the pages of People magazine. And as I say, that gender split may have changed a little bit over the years, but that means everything in that magazine has to be thought of through that filter, because relevance to audience is everything. And for topics of interest, local is so important because local is more real. It has greater impact, and that means greater influence on decision making. So making sure that your messaging and your spokesperson is focusing on the things that are relevant to the audience and local is really important. And engaging is what we talked about before, speaking in pictures, basically being a good storyteller, right? People want to hear your passion, right? So media come to spokespeople because they have expertise and they want to hear your passion. And that's the third category there, or the third column. What are the media looking for? And we need to know this because in our interview prep, knowing this helps us in terms of our ability to be able to maximize the opportunity, right? So here are the things that are absolutely important for media. And I think it was Ashley that said she was trained. Lovely, Ashley, trained as a wonderful journalist earlier. Ashley, tell me if these things are true to the best of your knowledge. A hook. A story has to have a hook. There's got to be a central thesis or tenet that the rest of the story hangs on, right? It's got to have something there. And one of the best hooks is timeliness, right? Media are looking for things that are happening currently in the here and now. So when we're looking to maximize an opportunity, you want to bring new information to the table. But timely is also about themes. So media will say, why am I doing this story? So that's the hook. And why am I doing this story now? What's timely about it, right? And timeliness is why we see often things happening in a year over and over and over, right? So tax time in a non-pandemic year or years, tax time. We're all talking about taxes and tax prep and tax savings and tax strategies in the spring. And then we're all talking about back to school in July and August. And you'll see tons of stories that are focused on that theme because it's timely and that's important. Christmas gift guides that come out in October and November to prep people for the Christmas season. Looking for milestones for your organization is also a really good way to find a timely factor in what you're bringing to the table in your messaging. In our 10th year, in our 50th year, for our third, release of this special varietal, on our 25th anniversary of our CEO taking the helm. Look for those milestones because that adds the timeliness factor. What else have we got? Tension. I have a great example of tension. So back in the day with working with Tourism BC before they were Destination BC, we used to set up kind of false competitions between the different regions, between the different travel regions inside BC. And it was be like, pitting the Northern BC region against the Caribou-Chilcotin and Van Isle against the Thompson Okanagan, that we're seeing more numbers to one place than the other. And a loss in this was a gain in the other. And it's that there's a trend moving more to Northern than interior. And the interesting thing about that, when you think about it, Tourism BC, Destination BC, it's responsible for people going everywhere in the province, right? So as long as people are visiting BC and experiencing different regions in BC, it's good for Tourism BC, for Destination BC. So putting these false tensions in place, the media loved it. Oh, look at this. Thompson Okanagan is losing out to Caribou-Chilcotin. What's happening? It's all people coming to BC and it's all people moving around the region and it's all good. So, but that false tension was a great way to get the media interested. I'm not actually suggesting that you want to put false tension, like arguments between wineries, between you or between regions. That probably wouldn't work out quite so well. But think about tension, like a battle or something difficult that you've overcome and something that you brought to the table to be able to figure out a situation and conquer it. Those are important for media because it speaks to that tension aspect of it. And expertise, that's where you come in, right? That's who you are. You are, you as a spokesperson, you're expected to be bringing specialized expertise to the table. And media are looking for expert input into stories. So that's the role we play. Right? And the important thing there is knowing not just about your own issues, but how they fit. If you want to be, Robbie, I'm speaking to you. If you want to be a great spokesperson, you're going to know not just about your own issues, but how those issues fit inside the larger scope of a sector or an industry. That's really bringing the A game to a media interview, being able to say that you're experiencing this at your space for your brand, but you know that that's similar to what others are experiencing, and then throw in a secondary message and cap it off with a proof point. Like it's so easy, right? But building that kind of a response to a question is really showing your specialized expertise. And again, guys, you work in this industry, you know these things. This is not me saying you have to pretend to be a neurologist or, I don't know, a somebody who specializes in dog breeding. I mean, I've got dog breeding on the brain because my sister's getting a puppy. Anyway, it's all about bringing your knowledge, not being afraid to bring that knowledge to the table and not speak just about your own organization or experience, but make it bigger, make it more robust. If you do that, you can become a spokesperson, you know, for your sector. And good spokespeople, the media will come back to you over and over and over and over. So if you really commit to the things that we're talking about today, and you want to set yourself up as a really competent spokesperson, and you do some good proactive media and have one or two really good interviews under your belt, the media have a tendency to go back to the same people because that person is dependable, because they're knowledgeable, because they speak about things that are important and they bring themes of innovation, et cetera, to the table. So if that's who you want to be, it can be accomplished. It absolutely can be done, for sure. And then the last point that's there is making it easy for media, because their world has become hellishly hard over the last 10 to 15 years. And I mean hellishly hard. It used to be that media had a whole number. If you were somebody who was a reporter, you had a whole number of supports around you. You had somebody who was going with you to take pictures. You had somebody that was going with you to do some camera work or videography. You could go back and file your story and somebody else was going to pick it up and put it, take that copy and put it onto social. Somebody was going to be able to take some of that video and put it onto the website. And you know what? Now, one reporter is expected to do all those things. You have to be committed to stay in this industry, in that industry. You really, really do. Ashley, I don't know if you've found, when you took your training, whether that was when things were starting to change, but did you find that single reporters were being asked to do more and more and more and more?
Yeah, I kind of came in just as print was kind of going out. So the education I got in school was actually still print-based. So I was just at that flipping point. But yeah, you do have to learn how to be kind of jack of all trades these days.
Yeah, it's really true. And it's tough. It's really tough, right? I mean, the number of people in a newsroom has completely collapsed. And when you're assigned to go and do a story, you're told, get the story, take the pictures, get some video, get it on, just, tweet it out, post it out on our channels, on your own channels, drive people to the website, get some content on the website, try and get an audio or a video clip up there. See if you can get an infographic or some other kind of graphic that will that's good content for the site. You have to do all 6 of those things when before you only did one, and tried to do that well and to the best of your ability. So it's a heavy, heavy lift. And you have to really be dedicated to want to stick in the industry right now, for sure. Yeah. Okay, that is a lot on that slide. Okay, what's the Kenny Rogers song? Know when to hold them, know when to fold them and fold them. That's it. Okay, Cynthia's probably gone to sleep now because I've been for such a long time. Cynth, are you awake? Oh, you're awake. Oh, excellent. So there's the next slide. That's good. That's a good sign. So there's the next slide. A nod to Kenny Rogers. Okay, I love the first picture. That first picture is called the No Thanks Lemur. No, not so much. So here's something about excellence in being a spokesperson and responding to media questions. As a question comes to you, you want to do a bit of analysis and recognize when a question is yours to own. And by that, I mean recognize a question that you actually want to answer. And there's 3 things that we can do when we do that analysis. I call them defer, deflect, and deliver. So the no thanks lemur is showing a deferral. And what I mean by that is, if a question that comes to you is outside of your area of expertise, if it is asking you to speculate, if it is asking you to speak on behalf of another organization or person or entity, you don't want to own that question. And by own it, I mean you don't want to answer a question like that. So what do? Give it away. No thanks. And by giving it away, I mean our best first answer to a question that is asking us to speculate or to respond to something we haven't seen before, or something that's outside of our area of expertise, is to acknowledge the question by saying, you know, that's a good question, Bob, but that's outside of my area. I don't know a lot about fill in the blank. You might be better served to ask that question, pose that question to a fill in the blank, right? So that is deferring. You're recognizing the question has been asked by acknowledging it, but you're not prepared to answer it. And so you defer, give it away. Yes, Leanne.
I have a question about that. You might get there already, but what about if they catch you off guard or they phone you and you do know the subject matter, but you don't want to talk about it and you want to give them this no thanks lemur, but how can you tactfully do that with similar language that you used, but with also like getting rid of them completely without looking like you're trying to hide something?
Leanne, this is intriguing. This is intriguing. I see Ashley is like, what's the story? Okay, so that's an interesting one.
Some people are just really afraid of, like Laura said, like they're afraid of saying the wrong thing, or they just think it's too contentious and don't want to touch it when it comes to some of these tricky things about fires or some of these other like salesy type questions. And some people would just rather not talk to the media, but the media, as you know, is going to keep phoning around until they find someone to talk.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So that's a really interesting one. So there's two things I would say. The first is that it's a best practice to never enter into an interview right away. Right? So if you pick up the phone and somebody says that they're from the media, the first best thing you should do is, I kind of say that maybe God will let you get away with a little white lie in instances like this. If you say, Bob, this is interesting. I'm glad that you called. I'm glad that you called. I'm just in a meeting right now, or I'm just heading out to meet somebody in the vineyard. Doesn't matter. You're just doing something. You're just doing something really important. I can't talk to you right now. Can I take your name and number? Can I call you back? Okay. Now I'm gonna put something out there. Why do we never engage in an interview right away when you pick up the phone? Why would that be a best practice, to push media back? Even if it's just for 5 minutes. I'm just wrapping up on another line. Let me call you right back. Why would we do that? Why would we not just jump in?
You need to prep.
Sorry.
Yeah, very much so, right? Very much. Even if it's an interview on a topic that we really want to do, you absolutely want to push back a bit and give yourself a moment to prepare a message or two, right? So when that call comes in, they're going to tell you. They're going to tell you right away. There's a wildfire in so-and-so place that's far away from you, but it's got something to do with the wine industry. And so I'm calling you because I got through to you and you picked up your phone, right? So what? Yeah, no. So you want to push them back and say, that's great, that's interesting. You can find out a few things. What are you looking for? Like we talked about negotiating the interview. Who are you talking to? What are you looking for? The more you can find out, the better. And I'm going to tell you why in 2 seconds. So first rule of thumb, never, ever engage in an interview right off the bat. Because if you do, the likelihood of being non-strategic is higher. If you give yourself the time to get prepared first and then call back and be in a quiet place and have your messaging in front of you, even if that's just 2 or 3 words in 2 or 3 bullets, you are going to do a better job than just trying to shoot from the hip. So there's number 1. Number 2, and I've experienced this lots with lots of clients. So I worked with Jeff Meerman, who was the director of comms for BC and the Yukon for TD Bank for years. And Jeff would get phone calls from media about, you're not going to believe this, bad banking practices. Okay, so he from TD Bank would get questions from media wanting to know about fees or about a regulatory issue or something like that, that was writ large across their industry, right? And of course, that reporter was calling Jeff at TD, he was calling somebody at BMO, he was calling somebody at RBC, he was calling somebody at CIBC, right? He was going to try and get information from the first person. Now, Laura is maybe not ever going to hire me to do this again when I tell you what I'm going to tell you next. But here's what Jeff would do. Go and talk to our association, because this is an issue that's affecting all of us, not just us. So our association can give you a better view of this, a broader picture, can speak from on behalf of the sector, can give you a wider range of thoughts and opinions than I can. It's really something that's impacting all of us. And he would push it off to their sector association, right? And of course, before he did that, he would have taken the information he got from that first phone call. What are you calling about? Who have you talked to? What do you know? Who you got, right? And he would have called the comms person at the association to say, okay, Globe and Mail is asking about this issue. I am not going to do an interview on this. I'm going to send them to you, right? In that intervening 5 or 10 minutes when he was just wrapping up on a phone call or having to meet somebody. Okay, he wasn't having to meet somebody in a vineyard. He worked for TD Bank, but you know what I mean, right? So he would buy himself some time. He would figure out as much as he could about the issue. He would tell the association person that he was going to pump them over to the media, over to the association. And when he called them back, and he did, because it's important to make sure that you're maintaining those relationships, he would say, Bob, I know you're interested in this, but TD Bank does not really have a perspective on it. Or we've got nothing that we can add to this conversation. Or we know that our industry is dealing with this on behalf of all of the banks in British Columbia or Canada on this issue. You really need to talk to Janice at the industry association, right?
Jackie,
So,
and I absolutely, and I would welcome you back for saying that, because I think that's a really important point is to know who your spokespeople are. If it's not your CEO, like you said, if it's not necessarily your winery, look outside, and maybe it's the association, and Miles is a great spokesperson for the industry, and he takes these calls all the time. Maybe it's someone from Tourism Destination BC, maybe it's a tourism. Know who their spokespeople are. I mean, we get calls on federal issues, and we know that that's not necessarily, we're not going to speak to that from a provincial level. So we'll refer them on to the National Association, and we'll let them know in advance. And sometimes it's a winery specific question, and we're not going to answer on behalf of a winery. So we'll do the same and defer that way too. So it could be referring to the bigger industry, or maybe someone from a different region, or knowing those spokespeople is really important, and using the spokespeople at your fingertips. So that's a great point. Yeah.
I'm blowing kisses and saying thanks to Krista Lee, because she has to jump off this call and go to another. And I've just been delighted to have you join us, Krista Lee. Thank you. I hope it was valuable.
Yeah, it's been great, and I apologize, but the rest of my team are on the call, so I know that they'll fill me in, but thanks so much.
Okay.
Can I just add something before Krista Lee leaves? Krista Lee is actually a great spokesperson for the industry, because Krista Lee sits on our board, and any one of our board members is a great spokesperson as well, to deflect.
Thanks, Laura. But you also definitely, as a board member, I mean, your team does a great job in prepping us for a lot of the interviews, because as we were talking about, sometimes the controversial ones, you know, I think the Alberta boycott, I'd have to say your team did an amazing job. So, you know, we definitely were armed with the points and making sure that we always turned it to a positive, even though we all know that there was not a whole heck of a lot of positive at that time. But you know, as Jackie said, it's really all about being prepared and speaking confidently about what you know. So thank
Yeah.
you and your team.
Bye, Crystal.
Excellent. Okay, take care. Bye-bye. All right, my friends, this is good. This is good. Cynthia, I think we now can go to the next slide. Yes, my BC wine Wordle. So what we've got there is a break slide, and it is, oh, this is so good. It's like 11 o'clock. That's fantastic. Okay. All right, people. I'm going to give you an assignment. I hope that there's going to be 2 or 3 people that are going to be up for this. And I want to figure that out before we go into our break. So, who would be willing? No, let me tell you what the assignment is first before I ask you to commit before you know what you're committing to, because that would be brave. Okay, so what we're going to do is take a break until 11. We want to all be back before 11:15. So maybe 11:12, 11:13. So that's going to give us about 10 minutes. And in that time, what I'd like you to do is create 2 or 3 messages. Okay, what would you like a general audience to know about what you're dealing with right now? It's spring. We're still going into COVID. We've got restrictions in place. We know that media are always, and I'm going to ask questions. You know that media are always asking COVID, 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 ad nauseam. So I want you to, I would love to have a couple of people put their hands up, and Robbie, volunteer to perhaps do a little interview, Catherine, and I'll ask a few questions. And I want to see whether or not, Ashley, we can actually deliver the messaging that we write down in response, Helene, perhaps in the chat, to the questions that I ask. So Kimberly's there, Ashley's there, Erin's there. Who is going to be bold and brave, put their hand up, and come back and answer a few questions from me? Who's gonna do it? Who's willing? I'll go easy on you, I promise. Free coaching, free coaching, free coaching. Yes, Ashley. Excellent. All right.
I'll do one.
Okay. We need one more person, Robbie. We need one more person, Catherine. Oh, Catherine. Okay, I have enough for 3, Robbie.
Robbie, I'd like you to do it, please.
I volunteer.
Coaching.
He just got voluntold.
Voluntold.
It's not coaching.
Robbie.
I'll do it.
There's no
All
wrong
right.
answer.
Exactly. No wrong answer. So over the next 10 minutes, okay, where are we at now? Okay, I twisted arms for 3 minutes. That was good, people. That was good. Okay. For the next 10 minutes, I want you to take a break, collect your thoughts, but write down, like literally physically write down 2 or 3 things that you want to make sure an audience knows about your, so I think everybody that's here is from, that would be representing a winery, right? From a winery. Ashley, yes? Yes, right? Okay. So what do you want? The 2 or 3 most important things that you want a general audience in BC. Let's even go further. Let's make it local. Let's make it local. So a local audience, because that's all that's traveling right now. What do you want them to know about your winery? Okay. And I'm going to come back. We're going to conduct 3 short interviews, and let's see how you do. Now, for other people who are not going to participate in an interview, I want you to participate by telling me and giving us your thoughts on how our interviewee did. And if you were the editor, what would you write as a headline for the interview you just heard? Okay, so let's reconvene in 10 minutes at, let's reconvene at 11:15. 10 minutes, okay? Go. Awesome. All right. Gonna take a little break.
I sure hope we haven't lost our spokespeople.
Robbie's sweating it out in the other office.
I'm not hyperventilating. It's fine.
I'm not sweating. That's you sweating. I'm not sweating. That's you sweating.
Is this camera hot in here? Or?
Oh yeah. Definitely. Okay, we are back. We are back. I know Laura pointed out that it might have been a tactical error for me actually to assign people to roles and then let everybody go away for 10 minutes because somebody might have opened the door somewhere and Robbie might have headed for that door and then kept on running. Right? All right. Okay. So I have just a few questions. I'm going to ask them. Okay. I'm not going to volunteer anybody on this. Who would like to start? Who wants to go first? First, second, and third. Ashley is making very small motions with her hands, very small motions. Anybody want to go first? Going first. The good thing about going first is that you get it out of the way. That wasn't at all.
I'll go first.
Ashley, way to go. Way to go. All right. So you've written down some messages. I've written down some questions. Let's see how this goes. Okay. So
Okay.
Ashley, thanks for joining me so much. I do appreciate your time. I just have a few questions if you don't mind. Going into our second wine season, coping with COVID-19, is this year different from last year?
This year's definitely different than last year because now we have, a season under our belt with working with public health orders. So we feel even more prepared to ensure that our tasting room is a safe and enjoyable experience.
Great stuff. Okay, and have you got any special processes in place to help visitors feel safe?
Yes, we do. We highly recommend that reservations are booked for tastings and for also dining in our restaurant. We have hand sanitizer ready to walk in the door. We require all guests and staff to be wearing masks and to keep social distancing. And we also have our tasting bars separated so there's ample room between guests. And we also limit the number of guests allowed at a time. So we only have six people in a group during a tasting and also in the restaurant.
And so limit in the restaurant as well as in the tasting area.
Yeah, and with the restaurant, we're very fortunate that it's actually a seasonal restaurant. So it's outside all the time anyway. And so it's an al fresco dining experience where you really get to be in the fresh air right next to the vineyards, overlooking the Thompson Valley and the river. It's quite beautiful.
Fantastic. That sounds amazing. I guess maybe my last question, Ashley, how have the recent more stringent travel restrictions affected you? What's the impact been?
We definitely noticed a reduced number of visitors to the tasting room, which we should based on the public health orders, but we really love the local support that we're seeing very many familiar faces that keep returning that are just really showing the support of the local area.
That's great. Thanks so much, Ashley. I appreciate your time today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Well done. Well done. Okay, let's go straight into our second one, and we're going to come back and talk about each of the three of them. Let's go into our second one. Oh, I'm reaching for a piece of paper. Okay, second interview. All right.
I loved how confident you were, Ashley, in knowing your protocols. Like you said it before.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Okay. Catherine, are you going to go next?
Sure, why not?
All right. All right. Catherine, what has the financial burden been like on your organization or on your industry? Because certainly what we're actually hearing is that most people have been purchasing and consuming more alcohol through the pandemic than not. What's your experience been?
Well, our experience has been, it's been a bit of a learning curve, not going to lie, but we've done a really great job early on at looking at ways that we could pivot our business. At the very beginning of this pandemic, we weren't quite sure how things were going to play out, and online sales were something that we knew that we needed to continue to drive forward with. We put a lot of energy and resources into that, and thankfully, sales are considerably up. With diversifying the business, though, we found that there was a real need within the Okanagan Valley, specifically in the East Kelowna area. Some of our local neighbors had been experiencing issues with winter kill and frost. And so we opted to help out some of our neighbors and actually go ahead and do custom crushes and sell off some of our grapes. Now that allowed us to diversify the business out and kind of have, you know, a little bit of an egg in each basket instead of relying solely on dealing with just strictly our own product. On the plus side, that's also allowed us to really go ahead and hone in on our quality winemaking production. So this is the first year actually that we are going ahead and launching the Gita Family Reserve Estates line. Extremely small production, very high quality wines, where we're talking about grape yields that are far lower than what we have ever experienced in previous years. It really gave us a chance to hone in on that higher end tier of the market and create a new product line.
Fantastic. That sounds great. Okay. What's your prediction for the season ahead? What are you hearing about the products that BC is likely to turn out over the course of the year?
Well, we've been quite lucky this year in particular. A lot of our neighbors haven't experienced the same issues with winter kill and frost. And it's been a really nice opportunity for everyone to continue to collaborate with each other and share additional resources. And so I think you're going to actually see some really great wines because of those collaborative efforts that will be coming out and hitting market, hopefully at a quality level that is a bit higher than what we've seen before.
That's amazing. That sounds so fantastic, Catherine. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think it's been really nice to see the community come together as a whole. We as a business have really tried hard to look at supporting other local businesses, whether it be through our partnerships in our wine shop, we have one of the largest retail spaces for a wine shop, and really focusing on bringing in more local products, supporting those other businesses that would normally be at farmers markets that are seeing a downturn in those alternative revenue streams, and instead going ahead and pushing to promote them to our customers as well.
That's fantastic. Wow, Catherine, that just sounds like a great collaboration, both in terms of products and in terms of working together with your neighboring wineries. I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Great. All right, let's go to our third one.
Yay.
Grabbing another piece of paper. All right. Are you ready, Robbie?
Nope, let's do it anyway.
Okay, then. Robbie, thanks so much for joining me here today. I really do appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me, Jackie.
All right. So tell me a little bit about your experience so far this year. Do you find that local communities are stepping up to support the wine growers and sellers in your region?
Absolutely. I think that this has been a good testament to the overall branding and the camaraderie of the BC wine industry, where everyone seems to be supporting local, which has been absolutely fantastic.
what are you looking forward to now? Going, we're in the spring, we're heading into the summer. What are you looking forward to in 2021 in terms of your property and your product?
Well, for us, we are looking to, we're doing a rebranding for our product, and we're looking forward to kind of showing off what we have in store for the rest of the industry. We also are looking to move towards focusing on the fundamentals of hospitality. We've been able to, due to COVID, one of the small silver linings is we've been able to really focus on more in-depth and personal experiences here at the property, as well as expanding into other programs such as more educational tastings. And luckily, with the difference in clientele this year, we were able to really focus on that and put our best foot forward.
Tell me a little bit more about that. When you say educational, being able to focus on the educational, what does that look like?
So we're going to be putting more programs in place where we're going to be doing more wine 101s, going to do kind of fundamentals of wine pairing. We have an amazing staff in our kitchen, and we're going to be working very closely with them to add a food component to keep people on our property a little bit longer while still being safe and social distanced. We have an outdoor patio as well. So we're able to really focus on the triple S, the safe, the sanitizing, and the social distancing.
Excellent. That's fantastic. And it's interesting, you've answered one of the questions I had, which was, has COVID-19 allowed you to do anything over the last year differently than you might not have done? It sounds like there's been a few things that you've been able to do.
COVID has shifted, can't speak for the industry as a whole, but I can say from my own personal experience that it shifted away from the quantity aspect of the wine industry and more towards the quality aspect of the wine industry, where you can't really do 3 people deep on the bar anymore, where you're kind of pouring over people's heads and just kind of shouting that, hey, it's red, and then moving on, and hopefully they end up purchasing. We're able to have people gather around and being able to tell a little bit more of a story, a little bit more of the, again, educational aspect of it. And then hopefully the guest walks away with a better experience under their belt, but also with a mitt full of wine.
That's terrific, Robbie. I really appreciate you participating in this interview with me this afternoon. Thanks.
It's been an
so
absolute
much.
pleasure, Jackie. Thank you for having me.
Wow. Holy. What? Okay, all 3 of you totally knocked it out of the ballpark. Wait a minute. Ashley, Catherine, you've done this before, right? Yes. Laura, if you don't say yes, I'm going to ask Laura. I'm going to ask your mom, and she's going to tell me. Laura, she's going to say, you guys have done this before, right? Yes. Amazing. Okay, Robbie, you have never done an interview before?
No.
Dude. Holy. Yeah, right?
Thank you.
That was fabulous. That was all of you did an excellent job, just excellent. So some quick feedback. So Ashley, you went first. Really like that you were able to give me some lists of things that had happened. So I said, going into this, our second season, coping with COVID-19, is this year different from last? Yes, you said it was. You talked about some of those differences, but you still got in some messaging. Oh, and before I go any farther, actually, rewind. Ashley, what were the things that you wrote down that you wanted to deliver to our interview? Okay.
It was more of like,
not the only measure.
Yeah, so I kind of was like, okay, what is she gonna ask me? And I was like, well, COVID would probably be something. Yeah, what's happening with this, coming season? So I wrote down probably like 3 points in each category. So yeah, you picked the kind of COVID tasting room one. So I just wanted to like really hammer in that it was safe, relaxing, that there was, public health orders being followed, that we encourage reservations, and that
Yes.
the terrace was an outdoor, dining experience.
Excellent. I heard you use alfresco dining. Absolutely. Outside where it's safe. Absolutely. And I asked you also, have the recent more stringent travel restrictions affected you? I think you got in pretty much, no, well, let me ask you, do you feel as if you got in most of your messaging?
I believe so. I actually hadn't really prepped anything for that one, that like line of questioning.
Yeah.
But I just really wanted to, support public health orders, which is, staying local. So that's why we would see a decrease in the tasting room, because we're following those, and other people, and I'm commending other people for following them too. But then also just really hammering in, like, thank you so much for the local support, which has been true. That the support's been really great.
Definitely got that. I got that you highly recommending reservations. You talked about the COVID-19 protocols that you had in place, sanitizing, masks, distancing. You talked about the bar being separated from the tasting bar being separated from the other areas, that there was a limit of people in the restaurant and in the tasting area. You talked about the outside being an opportunity for distancing and taking that into account. You did talk about the fact that it was different because there was reduced numbers, but that was to be expected. These are things that I wrote down from what you said. Reduced numbers, but that was to be expected, and that you loved the local support. So all of those things were in response. So it really sounds as if you were able to deliver your messaging against the questions, right? So very well done. And I should have asked after each one what the headline would have been, and I didn't ask. So I won't put people on the spot now. And I also want to make sure I'm respecting time, but we have a little bit of time left. Okay, so that was good. So how did that feel in terms of being able to deliver your messaging against the questions that were asked?
It was nice. I had 10 minutes to collect some thoughts. I probably rewrote my notes a few times in that 10 minutes to really no, that's actually not that important right now. Let's really focus in. Yeah, so it was nice to, and then I kind of enjoy Zoom interviews because I'm a fidgeter. And so with a headshot, my hands are moving, my feet are moving, but you can't tell because I just keep the headshot only.
Your feet are moving?
Yeah.
That's all good. That's all good. We're going to talk about Jessica in just a minute. So that's great.
Yeah.
All right.
So when I'm in person, I have to be more mindful. So I feel a little bit more at ease when it's a Zoom.
a Zoom shot. Right. They can only see me from here to here. All right. Great. Okay. The next one was, here we go. I've got Catherine's. Okay. So Catherine, I asked my first question to you. Oh no, wait a minute. Let's go the other way around. What messaging did you want to deliver in your interview? What did you have written down?
The way that our business has decided to pivot during the pandemic. That's largely been my focus, has been on creating a number of different brands and facilitating. So that's an area that I have expertise in. So I want to be able to speak on that. Okay.
I absolutely. And was there anything else beyond pivoting?
The support local mentality and the collaboration within the industry, and just how important it is that we've all come together and we are a collective industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. All of those themes totally shone through what I got in response to the questions. First one was, and I probably scared you in the beginning, what has the burden been like on you in your industry? Because, and then we're hearing that more people are drinking now. Is that good? And your response was that this year has been a learning curve, that you have pivoted your business to online sales, that within the Okanagan, there had been some, and this was really good. So this was an example. So, and you really actually gave a perfect illustration of what I was talking about before, which is, can we put a bad thing that's happened, acknowledge that, but put it in the context of some greater good? And what an incredible example of that. Who knew? You've given such a beautiful illustration of the fact that the winter frost happened and messed up some plans for growers. And what happened was, with that winter chill and frost, that you did some, I captured the fact you did some custom crushings for neighboring wineries in your area. I got that the focus now is on quality, and that you launched the estate line. Good marketing, good promo in there for the new line. That was great. And you said lower yield, higher quality. And Robbie, that's something you picked up on too, but I'm going to come to you in a minute. But I underlined that lower yield, higher quality as being something that would have been thematic in what I would write because of your responses. In the next question, I think I asked about maybe no, not sure. Yeah, maybe I did. Prediction for the season ahead. And you talked about being lucky that in your particular region, you didn't experience it. You didn't experience the winter frost, but you saw great collaboration happening and it was leading to some really great wines. And then you talked about the fact when I asked you if there was anything that you'd like to add, and I'm going to come back to that in just a sec. That's a really important one. Anything you'd like to add, you said it was nice to see the community come together. You talked about the partnerships. Then you talked about the fact that you had the largest, again, turning a negative into a positive, the largest retail space. So that's a proof point. And that you were able to bring in, with the collapse of things like farmers markets and other methods of selling, you were able to support the industry and support some of your neighbors by bringing others into your retail space. So that was really thematic. So I would have, if I was writing a story about this, it would have been about collaboration. It would have been about community, the wine community coming together, and about your winery facilitating that, allowing those things to happen for better quality product and supporting regional or local sales. So that would have been a really good piece. So kudos to you. You got your messaging in. And okay, I'm going to come back to a few other things that all of you did very, very well. So Mr. Robbie H., who's never done this before, I got from you lots of good stuff. Okay, I said our local community stepping up to support the wine growers and sellers in your region. You started a little slow and a little tight, and you really hit your stride and got better and better over the couple of questions that I asked you. First answer was pretty succinct. Your support of the local community was great, and you're finding that to be the case. And then you talked about looking forward to a rebrand. And if it had been a real interview, I would have stopped you right there to find out whether or not I was getting a scoop on that. Because you said, we're focusing right now, we're just about to launch this. And I was like, my journalistic sense was like, ooh, am I going to be the first? Is he going to show me? Can I get a sneak peek? Can I get a photo? So that was like dangling a shiny object in front of a largemouth bass. That was a big deal. So that was good. You talked about focusing on the fundamentals, and I really liked that. You talked about the silver lining of COVID. I totally would have picked up on that as a theme, that things were able to get more personal, and it allowed you to focus more on education. And I didn't have an education question written down, but you took me there with that response. And I asked you, tell me more about education. What do you mean by that? What are you doing? And you were able then to talk about the new programs that you'd put in place, the Wine 101, more of those, that there were pairings, that there was a new food component that you were bringing to the table. Food component to the table. You talked about outdoor, and then you used a phrase that I probably would have totally highlighted, the triple S, right? What was it? Sanitize. What was the triple S? Safety, something.
I wrote it down. Safe, sanitized, and social distance.
And social distance, right? So catchy. So catchy. I absolutely would have gone with something that noted triple S, because that really worked. And then the last one I asked you, has COVID-19 allowed you to do anything over last year you might not have done? And you said yes, that COVID had shifted the focus. It was good. I've got good to define. I don't know why I put that little fragment of a sentence, but quality over quantity. And you were telling a story, which was really an illustrative anecdote about 3 deep at the bar and saying, yeah, it's a red. And now being able to do much more personalized, customized, and educational interaction with each of the clients that come through your doors. So really, for a first interview, dude, very well done.
Thank
No
you.
putting your foot in your mouth at any point. So
My
congrats.
secret is a standing desk, and I've been power posing this whole time.
Power posing, Amy
I
Cuddy.
have a standing desk. It's actually a thing. It's like,
Woohoo! We're doing the Superwoman pose.
I was.
See, it makes a difference. Awesome. All 3 of you did an excellent job. So anybody come up with a headline? I know I was going to ask everybody for a headline. Anybody come up with a headline? What was there anything catchy or that caught your attention in any of the 3 of those interviews? I think you've got some stars in the making, by the way, Laura.
I was just gonna say, if I were to get a media call this afternoon asking how wineries are pivoting to this spring to welcome guests and visitors, I would call each and every one of you, because what you guys all brought to the interview tells your own story very well, but all of you guys tell the same overarching story that I think would just position the industry so well. You all spoke about the safety precautions you're taking. So as a journalist, and I'm not a journalist, but I would feel very confident in writing about you guys, because I know that that is at the forefront. It's not going to be the headline of the story, but it would give me as a media writer the confidence that and the assurance that you guys are taking those precautions, and therefore I want to promote what you're doing. And you all have that special something unique about what you have to say, whether it's the al fresco dining and I don't know, Jackie, what do you think about throwing in buzzwords like that? It's not just outdoor dining. That's not going to maybe make the headline, but al fresco dining, that might make my headline. And then the lower yields and what that means for the industry. That's kind of the headline that I took away from you, Catherine. At first, when you mentioned the new line, the new product, I thought, well, that's newsworthy. But as the interview moved on, I saw that new product as something in the story, but not the headline. The headline being lower yields sees wineries come together and support each other. And then Robbie, with you, I'm right with you, Jackie, on when you said time is rebranding this year. I was just like, whoa, ding, 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 just like you scoop. And but basically the headline from your interview I saw is time is bringing new educational tastings, wine and food pairings to the local community, which those are all positive stories and newsworthy too. So
yeah,
what, Kimberly, I know you had some feedback because you took yourself off mute.
Yeah, I was actually for Catherine. The thing that really struck me is the diversification of the business and the sense of community. So for me, if I were an editor, I would have said diversification in uncertain times and kind of focused on that.
Yeah, nice.
Really well done for all of you. Amazing. Good to see.
Yeah, that was really, really good. So before we get to the last couple of slides, here's some thinking about being in an interview situation. Now, sometimes people say to me, I didn't get a chance to deliver any of my messages. Bless you, Robbie. I didn't get a chance to deliver any of my messages because they didn't ask me the right questions. Right? Here's what a great spokesperson does. You're going to use what you get and work your way from the question to the messaging you want to deliver. Right? So I said early on, we have to think of every question that's asked of us as an opportunity or a platform to be able to deliver our messaging. If we waited in any interview for the reporter to ask us the perfect question that fits our answer, you would be waiting forever, right? So that's not the object of the exercise, right? And what we just did is exactly what you should do going into every interview. And that is take some time, figure out what the most important things are that you want to deliver. And the more that we know about the interview, the better, right? The more we know, the better. And that's why it's good to do that little bit of negotiation. What are you interested in? Who are you talking to? How can I help? What's your focus? That kind of thing. What's the format? Doing that little bit of exploration is going to help you figure out the focus or the emphasis of the messages that you want to deliver, thinking about the audience. What's the message that you want to deliver? And then don't wait for the perfect question, because it's not going to come. Your job as a spokesperson is to treat it like an opportunity. The question has come to you. You've got written down what it is that you want to say. You have to navigate your way from the question to delivering your messaging. And that's really taking control in an interview. Now, we talked about deferring and deflecting and delivering, right? So when we defer, we're saying, no, this is not something that you're interested in, that you don't have the expertise to answer. But if you stop there, you've lost an opportunity to deliver something else, right? So you can say, not my area of expertise, but what I can tell you is, and then go into your messaging. Or from a perspective on our property or at our winery or what we're seeing right now. So you've moved from the no thanks, Lemur, I can't answer that question, to a place where you can deliver some content, right? So it's kind of a give and a get, a give and a get. So that's really important to think about every question that comes to you. Somebody is opening the door to a well-versed spokesperson to walk through it and deliver the messaging that you want to deliver. Sometimes it's not an easy fit, but the more you do it, the more you're able to say, yeah, you know, that's not my question to answer, Bob. That's better put to maybe our industry association. And I know Laura Kittmer there is excellent and can give you a sense of the, you know, overarching sense of what's happening across a number of different regions. What I can tell you is in our region or in our sub-region or at our winery, this is what we're seeing. This is what's happening. Okay, so getting from the question to deliver the messaging you want to deliver is really, really important. And you all did that. And here's the thing, you never know what a reporter is going to ask, right? You never know what they're going to ask. And part of that is because the questions they ask, as Robbie led me to ask more about education, the questions they ask are often predicated on the content of your responses, of your answers. So you can become really well versed at leading a reporter to ask what you want to ask. And there's some tips and tricks to do that. And if we had more time, I would get into them. But it's really good practice to think, to know what you want to say going into an interview, and then find a way to use those questions to deliver what you want to deliver. And you all did a good job of that. And if you really can't, you're going to defer, send it away to somebody else, or you're going to deflect to say, here's some other things that we've been exploring or talking about. Okay? And deliver is easy because that's them asking you an easy question and you being able to walk right through the door without having to do any kind of deferring or deflecting and be able to deliver the message. Okay, I'm looking at the time. We've got 10 minutes. I want to get out maybe a little early. Cynthia, if we go to the next slide, then there's just some things that I think that I have there about some of our kind of tools, and that is our bodies and everything that we have like with us. And Robbie, you were doing the power posing. That's fantastic. So it's your body, it's your presentation, it's your stance, it's your pacing, it's the air you're taking in. So in the top one there, body language, it's important to kind of square up. And I think actually maybe Catherine or maybe Ashley said some of these things earlier, to square up to the person that you're being interviewed by. Leaning in slightly forward towards them is showing interest in the topic, in the conversation. Balanced enthusiasm is important. So if you speak in absolutes and you say 100% of people love our products, or everybody in the community is behind us, or, you know, if there's ever any time where you speak in ways that try and illustrate 100% buy-in, to my earlier point about journalists sometimes being a little bit skeptical of what we have to say. If you speak in an absolute, you're putting a red flag in front of a bull's nose to go and find something contrary. So your enthusiasm should be balanced. And for each of those 3 interviews, I absolutely heard you be balanced. There was nobody who spoke in absolutes, 100%, never, always. You've got to avoid that. Gestures. I think, Ashley, you said you like Zoom because you can hide your hands down below in an area and nobody can see them. Gestures are good. Gestures are good. Now, the one thing that we have to make sure that we don't do, and I know that I did it mostly, you know, joking with you in this presentation, and that is what you want to try and do is keep your gestures, and people are not going to be able to see this, but I'm going to come back up a little bit. Keep your gestures between your shoulders and the top of your pants. So you want to make gestures, but you want to do it within a certain range, right? Open palm is always good. Your chest squared towards the person who's interviewing you. And this looks so much more inviting than this, right? An open palm rather than a pointed finger. So that's important. An open stance, having your, you know, chest exposed, the Amy Cuddy, as opposed to this, closed, right? Not interested, not engaging. This, so much more engaging, okay? So that's got to do with dress. One thing that you want to make sure that you're watching for in terms of body language is movement. The worst example I ever saw of this was a CEO that we had worked with in a sports industry. It was actually with Orca Bay back in the day. And this CEO was sitting behind his desk and he had his favorite comfy chair. Not only while he was being interviewed was he rocking from side to side like this, he was also going back and forth in his chair. As the man on TV was being interviewed, he was doing this in his chair. It was so terrible. My boss and I both saw him on TV. We got on the phone with each other and said, media training tomorrow. And so we said to him, no, never do that again. But literally side to side, back and forth. So as he was answering questions, his credibility, not fabulous, okay? So you need to make sure that you're grounding yourself. And we talked about looking behind you. Make sure that you're happy with what everybody in the audience is seeing if a TV camera is focused not just on you, but on the environment behind you. So body language in that regard is important. Facial expressions, that's important too. We want to make sure that we are, okay, when a question is coming to you, best practice is to have a poker face. Who plays poker? Anybody? Anybody play poker? Yeah, okay. Kimberly's like, yeah, but I'm not so great. I know, me either. Robbie, poker player? No, not at all.
Terrible at it.
I'm the worst.
I would be too. I'm way too expressive. But that's the thing about poker face, right? So what happens when you have a good hand or a bad hand, right? In poker, what's the most important thing to do? Don't let it show, right? Don't let it show. That's one of the key things, right? The same is true in an interview. You want to maintain a poker face. And here's why. If a reporter is asking you questions that are, you know, beating the tar out of your psyche, what you don't want to do is like, oh no, what's he gonna, right? Because the reporter's gonna go, oh, there are bones in that closet. Let's go there. Now, similarly, you can start out by thinking that a question is going to be easy and I call it from Shakespeare's comedy to tragedy. You can start out and go, that's wonderful. He's going to ask me about, no, where did he's not asking me about the, oh no, they're not going to ask. Oh, geez, no. Right? So you want to make sure that you're not going from comedy to tragedy when a question evolves as it's coming to you. Best practice, therefore, is to just absorb the question, listen to it, think about it, listen with your eyes as well as your ears, lean in, don't show emotion. The time to be able to show some passion or emotion is in the response. So as the question is coming, you're doing that analysis. Is this mine to own? Do I need to defer this? Can I add my own perspective? Do I have to deflect to a different topic or subject? Is this something I can totally slam dunk on and deliver? You're doing that analysis. And then when you respond, that's the time to be able to show your passion. Absolutely, Bob. The community has been amazing in their support of this. We're so thankful. We're so grateful. We love the fact that we're inviting more people from our local, all of that stuff, right? That's the time to show the emotion. Okay. And the last bit of that, vocal elements. Where do I missing anything? Dress and appearance. I said avoid clunky jewelry, anything that draws the viewers or the focus away from your face and your mouth and the fabulously smart things that you're saying. That's where you want the focus to be. So I say to guys, you know, don't put on your favorite tie that your children have given you that have all the Donald Duck and Daffy, you know, Daffy Duck or whatever. Don't do that. It will only distract from what it is that you're saying. So you want to stay pretty buttoned down, keep it simple, let the focus be on your face and on your words. So in terms of dress and appearance, that's a key thing there. And vocal elements, who's suffered through a terrible presentation from somebody who speaks in a monotone voice and they don't really move and they haven't got a lot of interesting things to say and they actually within the space of a couple of minutes can put you to sleep. Like, it's brutal, right? So from a spokesperson's perspective, one of the most important tools that you have is your voice. So putting in pauses that actually make you sound incredibly wise is useful. Pauses are powerful and they're a useful tool, right? So using your voice, lots of good modulation, ups and downs, showing the bit of passion, and being able to use that tool thoughtfully and knowing that when you lower your voice and when you speak a little more slowly and carefully, it draws people in to a conversation. So if you're making an important point, use that tool to bring people's attention to that important point, right? Okay, Cynthia, I think we're on to the next one, which might be pretty much the last one. Well, how are we doing for time? Oh my God, I've got 1 minute. Reminders. Okay, I think everything there is pretty self-evident. We want to prepare. We want to stay on message. Our job as a great spokesperson is doing our prep and then delivering what we came to deliver in that interaction between us and the media. Oh, industry jargon. I don't have a thought that the wine industry is as bad as some industries are for like acronyms and, you know, words that nobody understands. I know you all have your varietals, etc., and that's important, but I don't see this as being like the tech industry or, you know, some of them that just string together sentences without actually using a whole word. So I think we're okay there. Be yourself. It will relax you. Remember, take power from the fact that you know more about the topic than virtually any journalist that is going to be standing in front of you writing about your topic, right? You know more, and you've got great backup from your association and from your provincial and even federal Destination Canada counterparts in terms of messaging. And if we don't want to own something, we've got places to send a reporter to get the information that we might not feel comfortable delivering. after a media interview, and since you can go to the next slide now, after a media interview, think about doing some homework in terms of finding the interview that you engaged in and doing a bit of a critical look at it and doing an assessment to say, did I do a good job? Did I see the messaging that I wanted to deliver reflected in this opportunity? And what could I do better next time? So actually, I know it's horrible to see ourselves on TV or to listen to ourselves on radio, or to sometimes difficult to find the outcomes of interviews, but really you should, if you want to get better at it, find your media interviews and see what you could have done to improve in terms of the content. So we have 0 time for questions because it's 12 o'clock, but questions? That's it. Any questions? Laura, I'm turning it back over to you to moderate that part.
I think you've answered a lot of questions here today, and it's certainly been a pleasure to have you and your expertise. And thank you, Cynthia, for assisting on the call as well and with the slides. I love those mock interviews. I think we need to do more of those, and I certainly hope everyone here on the call found it valuable. I can't do enough media trainings. Every media training you get something different out of, or you focus on something new and different. So I hope everyone learned something. I certainly did. And Jackie, I really appreciate your enthusiasm and bringing it back to how it affects, how we can use these techniques and tools in our everyday communication, whether it's a media interview or just speaking with customers as they walk through the door, and showing that authority, and you are the expert, that your winery best. Yeah.
Terrific. Thanks for the comment, Erin. I appreciate it. I've seen you there the whole time with your beautiful rolling hills in the background. I appreciated you sticking with it. Thank you.
All right. Well, if there's no further questions, we will adjourn to some lunch and a recording. Like I said, recording and the presentation will all be made available to you following this. And we welcome any feedback from you guys. And if you want to hear more from Jackie or more media sessions and training, let me know.
Thank you, Jackie. Thanks, Laura.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.